cut-off jean shorts,
Yo, Don, get with.
scuba diving in cut-off jean shorts, and jean short... What is that? What is that outfit? I mean, look at that. What is going on? That's just out of control. When was this ever a good idea? I mean, I love the 80s, but somebody has got to draw a line somewhere. Anyway, I'm Peter Billigus, and this is Money in the Movies. Hello and welcome to Money in the Movies, a show where we review films based on their financial accuracy. Today's movie is the 1980s TV movie Dreams of Gold, directed by James Goldstone and starring Cliff Robertson, Loretta Swift, and you want to know who else is in this movie? Are you ready? You're not ready. In this movie is none other than Cobra Kai's #1 student, Johnny Lawrence himself, actor William Zabka.
They're wrong. It's not the gold.
Dreams of Gold is, at least for me, a stroll down memory lane. I grew up in the 1980s, and I remember watching this TV movie on, well, TV, because that's how we rolled back then. Side note, even though I grew up in the 1980s, I never wore this jean shorts ensemble. Okay, fine, I wore it, like, once. Maybe twice. Okay, fine. That's all I wore. Dreams of Gold is based on the true story of Mel Fisher, a treasure hunter who found the most valuable shipwreck in recorded history, the Atocha, off the Florida Keys. Fisher was a one-time chicken farmer who left the Midwest to open up a scuba dive shop in California. While in California, Fisher heard about the wreck of the Nuestra Senora de Atocha, a Spanish galleon that sunk off the coast of Key West, Florida in the year 1622. It was rumored that the shipwreck dumped between $250 and $500 million worth of gold, silver, copper, and jewels into the ocean. In 1969, more than 300 years after the sinking of the Atocha, Mel Fisher packed up his wife, his kids, and too many pairs of cut-off jean shorts and moved to Florida in search of the Atocha full-time. He made small finds along the way, some gold coins, some gold chains. They even found a cannon. And when you think about it, that is pretty cool. Because how many people, when asked, "So, what did you do today?" can answer, "Oh, nothing much. I just was, I just found a cannon." Anyway, it took Fisher and his family 16 years to find the motherlode treasure of the Atocha. But find it they did, and when the counting was done, Fisher and his family were looking at a war chest estimated to be worth about $400 million. And that was in 1985 dollars. The search was long and difficult, but a huge win for Mel Fisher. It was also a huge win for William Zabka. We won! In this film, Zabka's character gets to win, when in another film, made about a year earlier, his character didn't do so well. While it took Fisher 16 years to find the treasure, the lengthy search was only part of the problem. Sadly, the quest for the Atocha took Fisher's own son Dirk and his wife Angel, as well as another diver named Rick Gage, when one of their own boats sank. Fisher also ran into legal troubles, which is what we are going to discuss here today. Fisher's quest for the Atocha brought up the big question, a question that before him really hadn't been asked before. If you find sunken or buried treasure, can you keep it? Now, I know most of you aren't going to abandon your career and become full-time treasure hunters. Most people don't have the time, they don't have the money, and almost no one has the jean shorts. But consider this. You buy a house. Okay, that's a gingerbread house, but we'll go with it. You buy a house, and the seller signs a contract that they have moved all of their stuff out of the house. You live in that house for a few years, and then you say, you know what? I want to renovate my kitchen. So you smash a wall, and inside that wall is a small steel box. You open the box, and it is filled with cash. Can you keep the cash? I mean, you own the house, right? And the seller did sign a contract stating they had moved everything out. So it's yours, right? Or what about something in plain sight? You buy a house that includes all the fixtures, which means you are buying anything that is permanently fixed to the house. One of those fixtures is a chandelier. You live in the house for a few years, then your sister's boyfriend's cousin's ex-wife's former dog walker is now an antiques expert, and he comes over for a cookout. As he is smearing his hamburger with just the right amount of Dijon mustard, he notices the chandelier and says, "Hey, that chandelier is worth $1 million. Is it yours to keep?" Well, there are 4 things to consider when you find lost property. Number 1, in the United States, found property is typically governed by state law. So what might be the case in California might not be the case in Georgia. Number 2, the second thing to consider is whether the property found is evidence in a crime. If you find $1 million in drug money, whether you find it on the sidewalk, in a public park, or in your own basement, you ain't keeping it. I bring this up because some of the most valuable lost treasures in the world are stolen. The paintings taken in 1990 from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts are considered to be worth $500 million. If you find these paintings, you may get a reward, but they are evidence in a crime and you cannot keep them. And by the way, if you took these paintings, please return them. Come on. The third thing to consider is where the property was found. For our purposes, found property locations can be divided into 3 categories: public land, private land, and no one's land. Public land would include places like subways, sidewalks, or national parks. If you find treasure on public land, there is a good chance you will be able to keep it if the original owner cannot be found. More on this in a minute. Private land is any land owned by an individual, company, or non-government entity like a non-profit corporation. If you find treasure on land that you own, well, there's a good chance you will be able to keep it. But if you find treasure on land that someone else owns, it may be hard to claim as yours, unless you can prove it actually is yours. If I drop my Rolex watch at your house party, you don't get to keep my Rolex watch even though you found it at your house. By the way, I don't wear a Rolex. I don't even wear a watch. I actually check the time the way the ancient Macedonians did it. Ask the guy next to you. And then there's no one's land. No one's land is actually not land, it's, the ocean. Since most of the planet's surface is covered by ocean, this is a huge area. Mel Fisher's discovery of the Atocha became part of the impetus for the Abandoned Shipwreck Act. The act clarified that if a shipwreck is found within 3 miles off the United States coastline, it becomes property of that state. Or if a shipwreck is found within a lake or a river in a particular state, it becomes property of that state. But if you find sunken treasure more than 3 miles outside of any U.S. coastline, there is a very good chance that you can keep it. Fisher's find of the Atocha was about 35 miles off the coastline of Florida, well outside the 3-mile limit. So if you find unclaimed property, remember, number 1, state law comes into play. Number 2, you can't keep it if it's evidence in a crime. Number 3, where you find it matters. And number 4, the final thing to consider, and this is the big one, is the legal classification of the found property. Most states divide found property into 4 categories: mislaid property, lost property, abandoned property, or treasure trove property. The point of these classifications is to allow the courts to determine the rightful owner. Mislaid and lost property is any property that is accidentally, involuntarily, or unknowingly separated from the owner. If you find property that is classified as lost or mislaid, you can keep it as long as the rightful owner doesn't come and claim it. So if you go hiking in the woods and you find a Rolex watch, you can keep it as long as the rightful owner doesn't claim it. And how would the rightful owner ever know? I mean, why couldn't you just sell it to a local pawn shop? That's not a local pawn shop. That's a gingerbread house again. Well, pawn shops are required to report their purchases to the police as a way to track stolen goods. So that might not work. Also, it is important to report found property because the property might be evidence in a crime. That Rolex watch that you found on the hiking trail might not be there because someone just dropped it. It might be there because something far more nefarious happened. And I never get to use the word nefarious, so please take this seriously. That watch you find on the trail side may not only be evidence, but it might be an actual clue to solving an open criminal case. So if you find something, please report it and let justice be your reward. But suppose you find a Rolex watch in a dumpster. Well, this would be a pretty good example of abandoned property. Abandoned property is any property that the owner has intentionally parted with. If you find abandoned property, it is much easier for you to claim it as your own, even if you find it on public land or even on someone else's land. If you find a cashmere sweater in the dumpster of a hotel you're staying at, well, you don't own the hotel, but because that sweater is essentially abandoned, there is a very good chance that you can keep it. In the case of Mel Fisher and the Atocha, the Spanish government did try to claim it was their ship, but the courts ruled that since the Spanish government hadn't searched for the Atocha in hundreds of years, they had effectively abandoned the property. The final classification of found property is referred to as treasure trove. This classification is literally buried treasure. If I am camping in the woods and I dig a hole for my campfire and I find a piece of jewelry that is over 100 years old, well, the courts would probably rule that the rightful owner of that buried piece of jewelry could not be found, and I would be able to keep it. However, there can be complications if I don't own the land because I would need permission to dig on public land or on someone else's land. After much legal debate, it was decided that Fisher and his family were allowed to keep the treasure they found from the Atocha shipwreck. It was not only abandoned property, it was also found in no one's land, and those two facts together made the argument very strong for Fisher's case. So what can you and I learn from Mel Fisher's experience? I mean, most of us aren't going to give up our careers and go scuba diving in jean shorts looking for treasure. But here's the good news. Right now, you might have some treasure in your name. Treasure that belongs to you, and you don't need to go anywhere to get it. You can hunt for it right now. Curious? Well, let me explain. Imagine you rent an apartment in New York City. That's not New York City. That's still not New York City. Fine, we'll go with that. Welcome to New York. You rent an apartment in New York, and you pay $100 as a security deposit to hook up your cable TV. You live in New York for a few years, and then a good friend of yours says, "Hey, I just started an inflatable dartboard company. Come work for me in Los Angeles." That's not Los Angeles. So you come to Los Angeles and you come work for your friend. You cancel your cable, you move out of your New York apartment. And while you're looking for an apartment in LA, you couch surf with your friends, moving from place to place to... Oh. You got some pretty nice friends. I might actually stay there a while. Anyway, while you're hopping around, remember that $100 security deposit that you paid years ago to hook up your cable TV in New York. Well, that cable company keeps trying to send you the check, but it keeps coming back because you're not in the same place for more than a few months. Eventually, the cable company says, "The heck with this, we can't find you." We give up. But legally, they cannot keep your security deposit because it's not theirs. So what can they do with that money? Well, in the United States, they can give that money to a little-known place called the Unclaimed Funds Office at the State Treasury Department. In the United States, we have a federal Treasury Department which is located in Washington, D.C. Fine. But every state has its own Treasury Department. And within these Treasury Departments, there is a little-known office called the Unclaimed Funds Office. This is where all the missing money in that particular state is gathered. An unclaimed tax refund, an uncashed check, an abandoned safe deposit box, an inheritance you never even knew about. Between all the states combined, more than $3 billion is returned annually. 1 out of every 10 people in the United States has some unclaimed money in their name. The question is, do you, or anyone you know or love, have any unclaimed money in their name? If you are curious to find out, you can visit the website www.unclaimed.org. Unclaimed.org is the official website of the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators. These are the folks who work with the unclaimed funds offices of all the state treasury departments. On this site, you can search any state that you have ever lived in, as well as Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. By the way, if you live in Canada, you can search your province as well as the unclaimed database of the Royal Bank of Canada. And aside from the U.S. and Canada, which other country hosts its unclaimed database on unclaimed.org? You guessed it, Kenya. That's not Kenya. Anyway, if you are a citizen of Kenya, or if you simply lived there and spent money, it's worth checking unclaimed.org. Now, a few things to remember about unclaimed.org. Number one, unclaimed.org is not unclaimed.com or .net or whatever. This is important because of point number two. This website is free. There is no charge to claim your money. If you find there is some money in your name and the website tells you that there is a small processing fee to claim your money, you are on the wrong site. Unclaimed.org is free. Number three, you can search any state that you have ever lived in. So think about where you have been in the past and search there. And remember, you can even search Kenya. That's still not Kenya. Legally, you can only claim money that is in your name. Depending on the size of your claim, the state may ask you to prove that you are in fact you. The last time I had money on this site, it was about $600. In order to collect that money, I had to sign a sworn statement and have a notary public notarize my signature. And I had to photocopy both sides of my driver's license and mail all of that in with my sworn statement. That was for $600. If you have $6 million in your name, then you will probably have to go in for an in-person meeting with a treasury agent from your state. I get this question all the time. What about my Uncle Ted? Well, first of all, if that's your Uncle Ted, maybe don't invite him to Thanksgiving this year. Maybe just mail him his turkey. But if Uncle Ted is dead, only his rightful heir can claim his money. If your parents or grandparents have passed away, it is worth checking their name, as deceased people are a common group to have unclaimed money in their name. So while most of us aren't going to become full-time treasure hunters, we can go looking for unclaimed money in our name, all from the comfort of our couch. Remember, 1 out of every 10 people watching this will have some money in their name. As to the movie Dreams of Gold, it is accurate in its description of what Mel Fisher had to go through in order to claim the treasure. Therefore, I'm going to give it 3 out of $3 signs. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to this channel. And if there's a movie that you would like me to review for its financial accuracy, please let me know in the comments below. Until then, I'm Peter Billigus, and this is Money in the Movies.